Now, is there any money in the back end? Another term for back end is contingent profit participation, back end definitions. There's other.
I mean, you'll get it. It's just meaningless.
It's meaningless. Well, what is it? Let's first understand what it is. What is when someone says, "Hey, I want 10 points on that show. Or I have 50% of the back end." What does that mean, and how and when is it relevant?
That means that after the show has recouped all its costs, and remember, there's a thing called an imputed license fee, because like at least
well, we're taking a deep dive now. So, okay, but let's not go into that. We're gonna get to that, but before we get to it, let's just frame it for them. So 10% of the back end means what? Means
the reason I say that is because in all these deals you have to recoup the production costs because there's no revenue coming in from the airing of these series on the network that buys it.
What do you mean? There's advertising revenue.
Yeah, but that's not counted. That's not counted towards recoupment.
Wait. Are you saying that? We gotta pull up with this because this is a very important concept here. You just said that the network, and your initial point was, hey, the network has to recoup its costs.
Yes.
In order to pay you, back end.
Yeah.
Okay. Point taken. I think everyone understands that. And then you said that in order for you to get back in, there has to be recoupment and revenue beyond recoupment, meaning they got to make their money back plus some, right? Got that. Now, you said that, but in calculating the money they generate, that would qualify as recouping their spend, and that would qualify as revenue on top of the recoupment, you said the revenue they generate from advertising, that monetization dollars doesn't fit into that, doesn't count.
Correct.
That sounds insane, doesn't it? Think about it objectively. They're monetizing a show. And now, by the way, this is look, this is how the business works for generations. I just want to make sure people understand this concept.
Well, originally it started because most cable networks they sell a rating. They don't sell per show, and so there's no way to figure out what each show makes because they sell a rating. Except the very, very big show. So it's called run a schedule. They do run a schedule advertising where they sell a rating.
Oh, because the math is kind of hard. Yeah, that's why we can't pay people. It makes perfect sense now. Oh, thanks. Okay. Yeah.
So because of that, the money's not attributed to each specific show.
I see. They can't allocate what
because they just have to get a rating within that.
They get mixed
that
up.
day part.
They get mixed up.
They don't have to. Yeah, they just have to get a rating within the day part, so they can move stuff in and out.
Okay.
And as long as they get the rating, that's fine. So because of that.
No, it makes perfect sense now. Listen, we can move on. Yeah. So basically, the revenue, just to point out, guys, the advertising revenue generated in connection with your show is not part of the back end calculation, meaning the money that goes into recoupment, that is not counted. So what money is counted? What would qualify for the network to consider being recouped on a show and then generating revenue?
Like third-party syndication, merchandising. The problem is cable networks especially, they play a show forever. So all of a sudden it loses some of its marketability because it's been played on the network. So who wants to buy something that's like, it's like, do you want Real World after, like, what network's going to take Real World after Real World's been played 5 zillion times during that current season?
Got it.
Unless it's an international market, you can make some money on international markets.
Got it.
But if you want to do something like that, you probably want to do it in a separate pot, so it's not mixed in. So merchandising, you would want to do a separate pot. International revenue, you would want to do a separate pot. Home video, you want to do a separate. You try to take everything out of that whole recoupment, and then the other side of that is what it's called imputed license.
But okay, before I want to make sure people understand this. So the revenue that's that would be qualified for the show to recoup its production spend would be off network licensing opportunities and syndication, right? Yeah. Licensing it to third parties, licensing it overseas, merchandising revenue generated in connection with that show, and was there another category you mentioned that I didn't catch? I think that was it, right?
Yeah, I think that's
merch. International.
You could probably include digital down. If we're not including, but
that's part of license fees. I would think.
That's part of home.
But that's how the network is going to calculate its ability to get out of the red and pay for those production budgets, and then pay you some revenue. Which is why you said initially that it's hard for anyone to ever receive any money on the back end because there's not a lot of money
going into
those things. Now, unless the show is probably like Real World, obviously, your franchise has been on for tons of seasons, generating tons of money.
But that's when you get in, like, all of a sudden now that's when you get into imputed license.
Okay, so break down the imputed license fee concept for us.
It's because, like, cable networks do not charge a license fee like broadcast networks do. So what they'll do is they'll say, you know what, we'll say a license fee, we'll give you 50%, 60%, 85%. We'll impute a license fee, which is like of as a percentage of the production cost. So it's like if the show costs $100,000, we'll impute, which will for calculation purposes, we'll say that we paid a $75,000 license fee.
We're going to unpack that a little bit because this is a very complex concept. I want to make sure people follow this. So you said that the network doesn't charge a license fee to itself for the use of your show.
Yep.
So the network isn't, customarily speaking, if production company A, if the network was licensing a show from a third party, they'd pay them a license fee for that show. But when they acquire your show, your non-scripted reality show, when they acquire that, they're not paying you a license fee for that because they own it. So what they'll do is, like you said, Sean, and if they're not paying you a license fee, then there is no revenue being generated in connection.
So you'll never reach the back end.
So you never reach the back end. So what Sean is saying is that what they do customarily is they will quote unquote impute, meaning allocate what would normally be a license fee. They pay to someone else. They'll pay it to you for your show. It's called an imputed license fee, so that you can begin to receive quote unquote some level of revenue. And then you can they can potentially recoup, and you can get some portion of back end.
Or conversely, they'll reduce the amount that they can recoup. Like they'll say, we'll only recoup 25% or 40% of our production costs
versus 100%. And that's where you'll be able to say, oh, okay, well, my show has a potential of generating revenue for the network because they're imputing a license fee of 60% of the production costs versus the full 100% of the production costs, right? Okay, so I think I explained that, or we got through that. And again,
I mean, it's still. I mean, it's like with film and like it's just hard to get to. So it's like you shouldn't rely on back end.